Yeah, so it's going pretty well. I'm dominating. I'm going to continue to dominate. I'm the best there is.
All right, well, we'll check in with you later on the
Blessings.
tournament.
Go!
I need more stuff. Can't see any more stuff, but now I go. I'm keeping up with the Joneses.
Hello and welcome to Eternal Durdles. I'm your host, Zach Clark, and with me as always, Phil Bleckman. Phil, how's it going, man?
Yo, what up? It's your boy, the GOAT, the OG, the greatest of all time.
Heck of an interview there. Heck of an interview.
What's up?
Yeah.
What is up?
Yeah, so we're going to go over our experience at the at SCGCON Baltimore, which I think there's some value here, even though we didn't top 8 necessarily. I think the value in that, like, what did we do? What mistakes did we make? You know, as people getting better at the game, as I think most of the people watching this watching the podcast are, as people getting better at the game, what can we do to improve? And where do we make our mistakes? Because I think it's really important to be honest with yourself when you're trying to improve, where you went wrong, what plays will you try not to make again, what lessons have you learned,
Yeah, and I think that also something that we have for ourselves as part of the cast, like we have subscriber goals that we're trying to hit with the channel and things like that, but as creators of the content that are on the channel, we also have goals for ourselves in a competitive capacity.
Yeah,
and that is like, as we do more of this and we get in more reps and everything like that, like our goal is to top 8 an event within the next year. That's like any legacy event we can get to is to top 8 a legitimate legacy event and, prove competitively that we know what we're talking about, as well as theory crafting and everything else. So we'll recap.
It has been a minute. It has been a minute. For me, my last top 8 was a vintage tournament in 2019. So now that I'm getting physically back out there, it's time to start grinding again.
Yeah, and I find that like going through and recapping each round of your event that you played after you've been removed from it for a couple of days, right? It's settled a little bit. You're off of it now. You can go back and reflect. And I think that sort of reflection to remind yourself and really ingrain any of the things that you remember learning in those events to really like set that in. And next time you won't make the same mistakes, or you can adjust from play patterns that you saw, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, one thing I like to do is I take notes after the round. I put notes onto my phone and just kind of like real quick, like give myself an idea of what happened. I'm not trying to write an entire tournament report in between rounds. It's so much mental load, but just getting a like big plays that happen, things to remember, so that when I go back and look at my sheets and whatnot. Luckily, MTGMELEE shows you all of your opponents and what they were on, which really helps like jog the memory when I'm doing this. But getting a chance to just go back and look at the notes that you've made in real time, like when you're there doing those things, it really helps you remember the key moments. So I think if you're going to be the type of person that does this, that wants to make notes, that even if you're not a content creator, I think it's a very helpful part of the getting better process. And if you look at a lot of the content creators we know that are very good, Bosch and Roll and Bryant, they do this too. They take those notes and in between rounds, their heads out of the game per se, but they're not, they're keeping a mental note of things to expect and how they did in the last few rounds.
Yeah, and other things that I'll typically do is if there's a critical moment or like a critical mulligan or something like that, I'll just jot down quickly like I'll just like initial almost like cards in my hand to analyze a keep or a mulligan against a certain deck, and talk those decisions out with people that you went to the event with. So just taking notes rather than like actually writing them down is helpful, rather than trying to take mental notes, because usually everybody's had the experience of like, hey, would you keep this? I think my hand was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Wait, actually it was this, not that. And then it's just like you never actually can analyze something because you don't actually have the details specifically. So help yourself out.
Yeah. So the day started. I'm gonna skip ahead just a touch and go to the end of round 1 when I interviewed Sam Rukas, who had won the first round. So we get a small tournament report from Sam. All right, we're here with Sam Rukas. Sam, What card do you think is going to be the most impactful card from Lord of the Rings? We're on day one.
Day one. I think it's already Orcish Bowmaster. I've seen a lot of them around the table set.
Yeah. So what are you playing specifically in this tournament?
In this tournament, I was kind of locked into breakfast, so still doing that. Doesn't feel great with a bunch of Bowmasters.
Bowmaster seems like it's pretty good against breakfast, being able to pick off your guy.
Yeah. I mean, you don't expose your combo pieces before your turn, but it's obviously, you know,
it's got flash.
It's a thing. Right? So walking around with a couple extra sticks today, a couple extra 2 fairies, and just hoping it's good enough.
Right.
So far, so good.
We're in round 1. What are you at right now? 1-0. All right. Joining the 1-0 club. All right. Thanks so much, man.
Thanks.
So now we can talk about Phil, your round 1.
So I had a very easy round 1. My opponent didn't show. So I got that nice buy, that nice unexpected buy.
Yeah, man. That's the super
1.
skill tester right there. If you can just have your opponent not show up.
Bro, but then pressure's on, right? You get a free buy in an event. You're like, all right, try not to squander this.
Yeah.
So I got to buy.
Spoiler alert. We already said we didn't top 8. So we already know that, Phil, you did squander. But so my first round, I played against River. He was on Reanimator, and I kept like an OK7 Force, Force Blue Card, Tomb, and Saga. So I didn't know what he was on. Obviously, I didn't know what anybody was on until the round started. I'm not as big a grinder online or whatever. I don't know everyone's names to that point where I'm just like, whoa, I know what you're on. But I kept what I thought was a pretty solid, like, in the blind hand of like Ancient Tomb, Baubles, and Force Blue Card. And River started out with like Unmask, Grizzlebrand, Reanimate, and I countered it. So I felt pretty good about keeping that hand. And then I just ended up taking that game with the constructs, which was, blanket, just what the deck does, right? What 8-cast does. Game 2, I sat it in my Graveyard Hate, and I opened Fairy Macabre and another Ancient Tomb Urza Saga startup. So I was like, this is fine. I'll just keep this, and like, we can't even counter it. So like he has to use discard to even make me not be able to interact. So like, let's just see how it goes. And he was light on lands and never really got he mulled to 6 and never really got going in that round. And the game ended with, I still had the Macabre in hand, and I had a Soul Guide Lantern in play, and obviously the constructs just took over the game. So that was my round 1, and I did a small interview with River at the end of the tournament, just asking him questions about the new set, Lord of the Rings cards, and his tournament thus far. Hey, we're here with River, my round 1 opponent. You were on Reanimator.
I was.
Yeah. So we both haven't seen any cards from the new set because I'm not playing any yet.
Right.
And it didn't look like you had any in your deck.
Correct.
But what do you think is going to be the most impactful card from the set?
I think definitely Orcish Bowmasters. That's one of the cards Reanimator players are going to have to learn to play around.
Oh yeah. Seems like Grizzlebrand being hit by an Orcish Bowmaster is going to be crazy.
Yeah, it really just turns off Grizzlebrand as a whole. So my thoughts are, as a Reanimator player, how much better does Atraxa get versus Grizzlebrand, and really kind of seeing these. I think one of the decks that I'm more scared of is like blue-black shows, like Shadow.
Yeah, Shadow.
And this, it goes really well into that deck. So if that causes a rise in popularity of that, that's something I would have to be worried.
Yeah,
so,
thinking of switching to more Atraxas or something like that. Possibly playing Sauron, the Dark Lord.
That's true. Yeah, that hurts really difficult tournament. So,
yeah. How long have you been on Reanimator?
So I've been on and off on it since 2018 at this point. Played it online a decent amount, and trying to come out to conventions when I can.
Yeah. Awesome. River, thanks so much, man.
Great. Thank you.
Good game.
Yeah, good game.
Yeah, in my round 2, I played against a 4-color control player. Nothing really too much of note, except that he was in, the same hotel or in the same car as somebody who plays at my local. and so he actually knew my list. They looked at Moxfield ahead of time, just talking about my control list. So he knew the my third Mystic Sanctuary, that like nothing was a surprise to him. And the games weren't really all that interesting. It was Slamma, Minsk and Boo, both games, Force of Will back, end of game. Minsk and Boo just snowballing both games, nothing really eventful. Just kind of got bodied by a single card.
That'll do it. Yeah, Planeswalkers are especially tough for your deck.
Yeah, Minsk and Boo can be your commander, so I should have played around that.
Yeah, you should have just played commander instead. Yeah. So my round 2, I played against Viet, who was on Death and Taxes, and looking at the life pad, I mean, this was a total grind fest. Like this is, let's find it here. This is what the life pad looked like here. It just constant back and forth. Game 1, I had to force an early Spirit of the Labyrinth, which I hated to do, but my hand was all like cast cards, all draw 2s. So I really didn't want to just lose to not being able, like not getting any value out of my cards. So I was like, okay, I mean, what else am I going to force against this deck anyhow? Like I might as well force of will this. They're not a combo deck. I'll be okay. And then I went, it just went like, he just went Skyclave Apparition into LOTR. The Retro Foundry got taken by the Skyclave Apparition. Sai got taken by another Skyclave Apparition. And, we were just jamming Fair Magic cards at each other until LOTR came down. LOTR took out something else, I think one of my constructs. And, the game just like kind of grinded to a halt for a minute. Put Yorion in his hand, blinked all his guys, and it was just blowout city from there. Like I couldn't come back from that. I think
I walked by your table and I saw the moment where all of the stuff was flickering back in from Yorion. Yeah. And I was like, oh well, that game's over, but they're still playing it out.
Yeah, I tried like I tried for like another turn or two to just like try and rebuild, but like I just didn't have it. Game 2 was like super fast. I prioritized the constructs and eventually just got in with lethal before Yorion could hit the board and like blink everything. And he didn't have enough to stop me completely. So game 2 went much better for me. I think there was a Chalice on 2 at one point, or maybe a Chalice on 1 at one point that was like stopping Swords to Plowshares, which he did end up getting rid of. But it by the time everything was going, it really didn't matter. I think I forced a Swords to Plowshares afterwards. Game 3 was a slugfest. Like game 3 was a slugfest. Again, let me show you that this is game 3. Game 3, my life total went from 20 to 9 to 25 to 3 to 9, and then I was dead. Like I'm just up and down and up and down. I had out my Morgul Blade or my Morgul Knife, Shadow Spear, and between Swords of Plowshares, LOTR, and Skyclaves, just the attrition that D&T brought, like I could not get past it. So I think I say this a lot about 8cast. If I have infinite turns against another player, like I'm eventually just going to outcard them. But that's not the case with D&T. D&T is the deck that like if they have infinite turns, they will outcard me. So I think the number one thing with this deck that got me is just like getting all that value a second time off of Yorion. Like having a guy on a stick that like disenchant on a stick, very good against my deck. Disenchant on a stick and then getting to get that value a second time is just bonkers. And between Skyclave and LOTR, it was I had no chance. So after I met Viet after round 4 because he was off to do a couple other things, but I wanted to get that interview with him. So I met Viet at the end of round 4, and we'll go to his interview right now.
All right, we're here at SCGCON Baltimore, the Legacy 10K, and we've got my round 2 opponent, Viet. We're in round 4 right now. Viet, how you doing so far?
2-2.
2-2, rough. You had such a great start.
I know.
You're not dead yet, though. Yeah. So you're on D&T.
Yep.
You've got 4 rounds of the format. Have you seen any of the new cards that you think like might be great?
Not at all.
Nothing yet.
No. I guess Orcus Bowmaster is.
Bowmaster, yeah.
Yeah, it's the hot card.
How do you feel about Bowmaster against D&T?
It's very okay.
Yeah.
I think the issue is black creature is already really bad against D&T. So I guess it's fine.
Yeah. I mean, it does the blocking for sure. It makes a guy, maybe it takes out a Thalia or something like that. But it does feel medium against a deck that's not drawing a ton of cards.
I'm not drawing any cards at all.
Maybe, do you even play with a Palace Jailer so you could get
I don't play Palace Jailer on my list anymore.
Yeah, and you're playing the 80 card version, so you've got you've actually got extra hate against drawing cards in your main
options,
with the Spirit of the Labyrinth.
Yeah.
Well, good luck in the next round.
Thank you.
We're coming into round 5, and yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm live too. I'm 2-2.
Awesome.
Quick ethical question for you before I move on to my next round. So I'm one of my opponents through it's not my round 3 opponent. I'll talk about my round 3 opponent. Was very cool. Knew who I was from 90s MTG. He had seen a list. But separately, ethical question for you. If somebody at a live event sits down across the table, hello, how are you? Okay, cool. You sit down, and then the first thing that they say beyond that is, what did you play last round? Which is obviously a fish for information.
Yeah.
What would you say in response?
I always just tell them. I'm not. So like, look, if I was more of a Spike, I probably would be like, we can talk about that after the match. And in fact, when I talk to people at the beginning of the match, I tell them like, hey, like, I'm working on a podcast and I'd love to ask you some questions about the new set afterwards. I won't ask you anything beforehand. I know that maybe you've got some new cards, maybe you have opinions about those new cards, but I'm not gonna, I'm very upfront about the fact that I'm not trying to like gain information from them. But if someone's trying to gain information from me on that, like, you could also lie to them and tell them you played something different the next round. You want to be like the true shark, right?
Well, I was sort of caught off guard by one opponent who had asked me, like, point blank, what did you play last round, in a way that was so obviously a fish for information, rather than actually caring what you played against last round, that it's sort of like changed the dynamic of like the hello, how are yous and the friendliness more towards like this like cold, like, oh, we're angling right now. And so same thing, I was honest in that scenario, and then after the fact was like, I think that might have been to my detriment. So I was like, but that was one of the things that I marked down afterwards. I was like, I'm going to ask how other people approach the situation. And I think the correct thing is to just say, I'll tell you afterwards if you're so curious.
Or lie.
It's no big deal. I
wouldn't lie. I couldn't do that. But, if you see someone angle shooting you like that, like, it's totally
I don't even know
to just be like, oh yeah, I lost to, oops all spells or something, like
it was one of those things where it's like, I don't consider it an angle shoot in any way. It's just like fishing for information. Like if you sit down at a poker table and you're trying to get some body language or something, like it's totally fair game, right? Like the game starts before the game starts. And in a high stakes tournament, like I can appreciate it. I mean, I'm not ever going to do it. I'm not going to be like, what'd you play last round? Or like, the gimmick where you're trying to like eyeball somebody's notepad or whatever, trying to fish for whatever information you can. But like, I totally understand if somebody else is going to try and get those edges if they can. And I was thinking, what is the at-large community's etiquette take on how to respond politely to those kinds of inquiries? But okay, so I agree with you though on how it goes. But
I try and keep it casual. I'll be like, we'll chat it up afterwards. Like let's talk. We'll definitely. I'd love to talk to you afterwards about it. Like
because like it was very obvious that it was a fishing for information, and I did not just call out the, well, if I tell you, it would give you a lot of information for your mulligan decision, so I'd rather not. Like, I think that's like, it's just like, just calling out like what is being insinuated is like actually the healthiest way to talk about it, rather than being like, oh, well, I don't.
I'll tell you after you mulligan.
I'll just, I'll also continue on the facade of like what you're asking. It's like, no, you can just call it out and be like, look, man, I don't want to give you that information before we mulligan. Like, I think it's, but it's a good question though. Like, power to you. Okay, so moving on to my round 3, I played against a guy named Josh, really cool dude. He recognized my name on Melee he played DIMIR Ninjas, and he had seen a long time ago on 90s MTG, I was, brewing around with a blue-white Ninjas deck, and saw that and had the take, and he remembered it, and so we talked about that a little bit. The match was pretty much his deck just did not function for him. Like he had a bunch of enablers, but just never, in one game, he just never found a ninja. So I was taking like one from Changeling Outcast for like several turns on no ninja. And then the second game, he missed on his land drop, so he wasn't able to protect a ninja he found, and I just hit it with removal. So the games ended up being not too interesting because his deck in two different ways just did not perform for him that round. He caught the bad end of variance. So that was pretty much that. I didn't make any significantly intricate plays. He missed a land drop, and I was able to capitalize. He didn't find a ninja, and I was able to take hits without having to expose removal on his enablers. So
yeah,
pretty
and this
pretty
put you
smooth
to
round.
2-1.
This may be 2-1.
Yeah. My round 3 was this fella Jeff, Grixis Delver, really fun opponent. Game 1 was Chalice and Constructs. Like, I just did the thing, put out the Chalice, put out the Constructs, and just got in there, right? Game 2, I was running hot. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna ram down Constructs, play Chalice on 1, and I was riding so high. And you know what happened? He played Orcish Bowmaster, and the content creation got me, Phil. I got in my head so much about how good Orcish Bowmasters is as a content creator, as like talking about it, as one of our videos up here, like we'll tell you, it's a very good Magic card. And I drank the Kool-Aid, Phil. I drank your Kool-Aid specifically when you got me on that whole, it's good against 8 cast, all the cast cards in your deck, all the drawing, blah, blah, blah. And in that scenario, I don't think it was as good as it needed to be, but I force of willed it anyways. And I had a thought monitor in my hand. So I felt pretty good about myself. I, slammed down my thought monitor the next turn after doing that. And I drew 2 cards, and my opponent untaps, and he cast Meltdown. And I felt like a moron because I could have saved that force of will for the Meltdown, obviously. And, and of course, like, then there's the thought monitor just staring back up at me like, you moron. I had no permanents on the board aside from thought monitor. Like, I'd already lost my, I think he wastelanded my saga, and all of my, like, I had Sea to Synods. So it was, yeah, I just looked like a complete fool there. And he trounced me in that game. And game 3, I'm gonna make game 3 quick. Zach respects Meltdown. Meltdown gets cast. Meltdown gets cast again, and that is the way game 3 worked out. And Jeff just ran over me. It took him a little while to flip his Delvers. There were 2 Delvers that would not blind flip, but once they did, the game was quickly over after that. And I did a post match interview with Jeff, and he had some feelings about Bowmasters.
All right, we're at SCG Baltimore, and my third round opponent, Jeff, was on Grixis Shadow. Grixis Delver. Grixis Delver. You're playing Bowmasters.
Yeah, it's 3 of them.
That seems like the hot card this week.
I love it. It's like my new favorite card in the game right now. Everyone kill a creature. Arrow out.
Yeah, man.
I play against Mother of Runes round 1, like the Death and Taxes deck. It kills Thalia on curve, it kills Spirit, it kills Mother, like if you're on the play.
Yeah.
It's just such a good card. So
have you had any blowouts with it yet?
No, because I haven't played against like a Brainstorm deck yet. Yeah. I played your 8-cast deck, Death and Taxes, and Reanimator. If I would have drawn 1 into the Grizzlebrand my opponent played, I would have killed him. So Reanimate, draw 7. 15. I had 2 mana, so didn't respect it, but unfortunately I didn't have it. So if I would have had it, it would have been a cool kill.
Yeah. I had Reanimator in the first round, and I felt in a similar way, but I'm obviously not playing Bowmasters. Right. I thought about actually throwing them in, because I'm playing 8 artifacts that make colored mana.
That makes sense.
So I could have, but I was like, that's too cute.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you're 2-1 right now.
2-1, yep. Lost to Reanimator, beat Death and Taxes, and just happy to be here. Love playing Legacy.
Awesome. Thanks so much, man.
Absolutely. Nice meeting you.
Have a good one.
Yeah, thanks.
So I agree that Bowmasters is obviously a very good card. It's going to be a mainstay for Legacy for a very long time. It is not the broken, crazy something or other that's going to overend the format. I mean, perhaps it will have a lot of impact on what X1C play as people get more accustomed to it. But the fact that it doesn't stop you from doing what you want, it punishes you for doing what you want, means that the textures is very different. If you get Hull Breachered in response to your Brainstorm, the game ends on the spot. If you get Bowmastered in response to a Brainstorm, you take some damage and they put some bodies on the table, but you still get to play a game.
You're still alive,
You still get to resolve your spell. So you got punished for your spell, and now there's a threat that you have to deal with, but it doesn't just straight up mean the game ends.
Yeah,
you know,
it's
like,
definitely better against Grizzlebrand than it is against what's called Brainstorm.
regular cantrips. Yeah. So it's like if you get Hull Breached in response to your Brainstorm, that means that you just got him to Turok and they made treasures and the game is over. Like it's just over. You're never recovering from that.
Yeah.
So
it's a 5-card difference. Yeah.
In those respects, like I think like in those regards, Hull Breacher is just straight up an actual hate card and makes games really uninteresting. It's just like uninteresting in the way what I mean is like similar to any hate card would hate out any kind of deck.
Yeah, like choke against an island deck. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, like a blood moon against your non-basics. Like it just straight up it ends the game on the spot. Whereas Bowmasters doesn't do that. So you know, I think we definitely had the hype. I'm sorry that you fell into drinking some Kool-Aid, but you know, now you know for the future, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like I learned that. Well, this is one of those moments that I was talking about at the beginning of the cast. This was a moment where I learned that I don't need to force of will a Bowmasters. I need to force of will a Meltdown. And I learned
Meltdown is one of those cards.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Meltdown is one of those cards where like the game usually ends on the spot. Not always. You can rebuild.
I've rebuilt from it, but not this time. Not especially not with over the course of 3 games. 3 Meltdowns were cast. That's just too much.
Yeah. I mean, you can draw basics against Blood Moon, right? Like there's maybe in a world, but like more often than not, the game ends.
Yeah.
In my round 4, I played against a guy named David. Very, very nice dude. He was on ALUREN. He was on Bug ALUREN with all of the 1/1 flyers that draw cards, and we played the longest, grindiest first game, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. It was probably the most like intricate and compelling game I played all weekend. Okay. We ended up finishing the match. I won the first game, and then we didn't complete the second game going to time because the first one was as grindy as you can, like literally miracles versus all of the X1s. You're going back and forth. Imagine that. Cemetery Illuminator was actually the hero in that matchup. I played Cemetery Illuminator over the weekend, and Cemetery Illuminator with Mystic Sanctuary and Thwart was my engine that kept up and maintained the capacity to trade with all of his 1/1s that all cantripped. So he would cantrip, and then I would Mystic Sanctuary for removal to maintain the board. And so rather than my removal trading down a card, Cemetery Illuminator going long meant that I was effectively drawing 2 to 3 cards every turn to his drawing 2 to 3 cards every turn off of like Uros and Baleful Strix and Ice Fangs. So it was just extremely grindy in that way. And I could never break through because he had this army of 1/1s, and he could never break through because I was playing miracles and had, all of the interaction to stop him from comboing me. And so we both just got to the bottom ends of our decks. So really intricate game. There wasn't anything like particularly unusual about the games. It was just an extremely grindy game, but also really, really enjoyable. A lot of intricate micro decisions that all mattered, and really enjoyable match.
Yeah. So before we get into my 4th round, I wanted to give a shout out to our sponsor, Moxfield.com. Moxfield.com is the best deck building website out there. Phil and I use it constantly. You can find all of our lists on Moxfield.com. You can follow the Eternal Dirtles Moxfield, where we put our lists up for tournaments. You can follow my personal Moxfield, where I have all my EDH decks, all of my legacy decks, all of that stuff as well. And Phil also has his Moxfield. So all those links are below. Check out Moxfield.com. They rule, and they've got just so many cool features. So my round 4. My round 4 was against Sam. Sam was on Goblins. And Phil, if I was on Rug Delver like back in the day, Goblins would have just scared the crap out of me. But in a deck where I actually have I've got creatures, blockers, and I'm also playing relatively fair Magic, and not trying to tempo my opponent out, this didn't feel like a very tough match for me. The first game, I just did some construct stuff, put out a Shadow Spear, and attacked, and I was fine. The second game, he pressured me with some Goblin Guides, and that was a little scary, but he drew me like
Goblin Guides and cards. Goblins?
Yeah, there were Goblin Guides. I don't know if this was an optimized list or not. No idea. I don't know enough about Goblins to say for sure. But the Goblin Guides came down, and they were pressuring my life total a little bit, but I drew like an Urza Saga, a Seed of Synod, I got a bunch of extra cards just for him, doing 4 or 5 damage to me over the course of a couple turns. And, Lackey came down a couple times, but I always had like a turn one Emery, so like I could just block it effectively. So it didn't really matter to me too much. I wanted to do an interview with Sam afterwards, but he had to run off to deal with some stuff in between rounds, and so instead I got my ride and my new friend Freya from the Philly scene to do an interview with me in between round 4.
All right, we're here at SCGCON for the Legacy 10K. We've got Freya. Freya, this is round 4. You're on.
I'm still live.
You're on. What deck are you on?
I'm on Painter.
You're on Painter.
Yep.
So this is the first tournament where the Lord of the Rings cards are legal. What do you think about the impact of these cards on the format so far?
So far, I mean, I've seen one.
Okay.
I saw one copy of Bowmasters.
Bowmasters.
And it killed my Goblin Lover that I was very sad about.
That seems the general consensus is that Bowmaster is out there right now.
That's the one that people are looking for. And I don't think enough people have them to make an impact on the day.
I think that's the general consensus as well. Yeah.
It will happen.
So do you think there's anything that you would put into your deck given enough time to pick those cards up?
Oh. Gutshot, maybe.
From the new set.
Oh, from the new set in Painter? I'm looking at the ring. I think it's a great target.
Yeah.
Overall, Painter's a tight deck. It's hard to get a spot in. And we'll see.
Maybe Cavern Horde Dragon out of the sideboard
Maybe
for that mirror match, right?
Yep.
Or for 8 cast.
Yep. Dragons always help.
All right, so you're live at 2-2.
Yep.
I am too. I'm live at 2-2 right now. We'll see what happens as the day continues then.
Yeah.
All right, good luck.
Thank you. Likewise.
In my round 5, I played against Pox, mono black Pox with classic mono black Pox. The way that the matchup ended up, what I remember from it, like the notes that I took down were he won the die roll, so he was able to pick me apart game 1. He stuck a couple of planeswalkers. It wasn't really much of a game. I don't remember ever really making any meaningful game action. I kind of just, my hand was picked apart. He played some planeswalkers. I never really did anything. I scooped the game. Game 2, I boarded in. I just moved away from everything that would 2-for-1 me, and I moved towards Triumph of St. Catherine out of the as like my way to like really steer the game. He did not see a Triumph in game 1 that I recall, but his turn 2 hand lined up really nicely with the draw that I had. So he was able to, I was able to miracle a Triumph, but he naturally in his opener had a Nihil Spellbomb and a Dark Ritual for Liliana. So he went turn 1 Nihil Spellbomb. I miracled the Triumph of St. Catherine, and then he just went Dark Rit Liliana, sacked my thing, and then exiled it from the yard, and then followed up with a Carr and a turn or two later, and that was it. So it ended up just being that like we sort of just like lined up our hands, and his lined up better. That was really the only argument would have been to not have Miracle the Triumph onto an empty board, but that I don't think anybody makes that play on such a low resource count, knowing that you're playing against the discard deck. I think you just slam the 5/5 and expect it to be good enough against black removal. But he had the exile thing. He had a way to get a very sticky planeswalker that I was going to have trouble removing. So it all just lined up, and he bodied me. It was a really fast 2-0.
Yeah, I ended up playing in my 5th round. So now I'm 2-2, and you are. I'll be something else at the end of this round, but you are currently 3-2, right?
3-2 after round 5.
3-2 after round 5. I also ended round 5 at 3-2. I played against Nick, who was on Death Shadow, DIMIR Death Shadow, just the standard, pretty much stock Death Shadow. Every time I look at a sheet versus Death Shadow, trying to remember like what happened, it's so hard because like I play the deck too, so I'm like, okay, this happened, and then I started doing damage to them. So the opener was just like the classic 15 life shock, fetch, Thoughtseize to open. I opened with Saga. They wastelanded some cantrips. I played another Saga, and then they fetch and they go to 12, and I go construct Shadow Spear, and it was kind of just over at that point. I think it's very hard for a tempo deck in colors that don't hate on artifacts to deal with two giant dudes that aren't being cast and a life linking card that these like tempo style Delver style decks just cannot compete with a life linking 8/8. Like, it's just impossible.
I was gonna say, I know we had our link to our interview with Tony Scaponi where we asked him, is Urza Saga the best pound for pound card in Legacy? And he said it's got to be up there with the other top cards.
I still think it's the best one. Yeah.
I think Urza Saga is pound for pound the best card in Legacy. And yeah, it's like an uncounterable Baneslayer Angel with an additional body as a backup Baneslayer is just like too hard for a lot of decks,
It's wild how good that card is.
So after round 5.
But wait, I'm not done round 5 yet.
Okay.
That was only one game.
That was only one game. Okay.
Yeah, so game 2 is really quick. Nick wasn't able to get their life total low enough to put out Death Shadow. And I was able to turn 1 Chalice. And Saga just finished the match for me from there. The post interview with Nick, they're super high on Fairy Mastermind, and they preferred it over Bowmasters in all 4 stacks, they've been saying.
I guess I guess blue count is still relevant, right? Like,
the blue count is huge, being able to pitch,
that and flyers, and also whereas Bowmaster is some amount of board control and board presence, Fairy Mastermind can be a way to rebuild on getting some amount of card advantage, which a deck like
Phil, let's take that again with the blue count, so that I get like a little bit of time to cut to the thing, because basically he ends saying that, so that if you start with that, it'll like look really good.
Oh yes, yeah. So Fairy Mastermind versus Orcish Bowmasters in a deck list like that, I guess it's like important to still be thinking about your blue count when you're contemplating which threats to play. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, Nick made an amazing point actually. Yeah, having more blue cards, like there are some decks that might not want Orcish Bowmasters because of that.
And they do, depending on what role you're looking to fill with that slot. Fairy Mastermind being able to rebuild some amount of raw cards as opposed to Bowmasters being more presence. If you feel like your deck is already pretty flush on heavy board presence, which often the case is when you have a really thick Death Shadow on the table, that being able to just go back up some amount of cards when you're exchanging between Thoughtseize and Force of Wills, just being able to go up raw resources, particularly when your opponent's trying to do the same, means that you can be in a very leveraged position just having more resources. So I think it's a reasonable. Yeah, it's still a reasonable comparison to Slate.
I think an interesting question then is like, are we going to start seeing decks that are Fairy Mastermind, Force of Will, right? Bowmasters, Grief.
It's possible. I mean, I think that Bowmasters, I think, has more homes in all of the decks that aren't blue as well. Yeah. Like in meaningful ways, like they would actually want that effect. Whereas I think a lot of the blue decks don't necessarily want Fairy Mastermind because they already have some amount of raw resource advantage with all of the other powerful blue effects. Yes. So I sort of think about it like Esper Sentinel. Like the decks that play Esper Sentinel are happy to have Esper Sentinel because it's doing a unique aspect that white doesn't often have in an effective, cheap card, the way that Esper Sentinel provides. Whereas Fairy Mastermind is good as a flash 2-drop, but there's plenty of card advantage spells you can be playing in blue or blue shells that they don't need something like that. You're playing like Staff of the Storyteller in a lot of builds. You have the 3-mana walkers that all are card advantage in a lot of ways. So like Fairy Mastermind has more competition in the decks that would play it. Where Bowmasters is like, yeah, you want it in Red Black Painter, it's going to do some work there. You want it in any of the like Grixis Shadow, where they're like looking for some additional powerful threat potentially alongside the base that they already have to make up for expressive iteration going. So there's some give or take there, but I think Bowmasters has more homes than Fairy Mastermind, but both are good cards.
So round 6.
Well, I was going to say after round 5, the thing that I took notice to in how I was going to go back and recalibrate my deck for a future event is I noticed that the games that I won, or the matches that I won, the deck operated the way that I wanted it to, right? Like I put in a lot of practice with the list that I brought, and it effectively worked exactly like I wanted it to in the matches that I wanted it to. The unique spot that I recognized that I was very, very deficient against in the 2 matchups I lost were specifically sticky planeswalkers. Minsk and Boo bodied me by itself in 2 games against my round 2 opponent, and then Karn and Liliana, each of them by themselves, bodied me in my round 5. So it was very clear that I was soft to planeswalkers, and that was going to be where I was going to be hindered for the rest of the day if I ran into it again. And so I was going to have to think to really, if I knew that a planeswalker was going to be coming down, that I had to really contain my counter magic for that. But that was the thing that stuck out to me after round 5, sitting at 3 and 2. I was like, I was very underprepared for planeswalkers that were not blue.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in round 6, this was one of my one of the matches of the weekend for me. It was against a guy named Max. He played lands. The games were pretty interesting. Cemetery Illuminator, again, the hero of this matchup, because the incidental graveyard hate, I was able to snag a Loam. I was able to essentially cut off his engines while going up resources on my end, because he did not have access or easy access to a way to remove a 2/3 flyer that was disrupting him meaningfully. And then I was able to go up a bunch of resources on it. So it really carried the match. Cemetery Illuminator was definitely the hero there. But beyond that, that was really both games. Both games were on the back of Cemetery Illuminator disrupting the graveyard. Nice. The real shining moment of this match, though, was I'm playing, fully altered miracles. And he's like, oh, you like altered miracles, huh? Yeah. So he reaches into his bag and he pulls out a deck box and he's like, you'll appreciate this. And he hands me the most exquisite, fully altered miracles deck I've ever seen in my life. It was just every single,
just content just for you.
It was all full art, just masterpieces across the table. Just I thought my collection was good, right? I thought my altered miracles deck was pretty.
Yeah,
man, I feel like my shit is child's play compared to what he handed me. It was a museum. It was a museum in a deck box, and it was the moment of after seeing that thing, I was like, man, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that somebody else had a miracles deck that looked like this. It was. It was breathtaking. It was absolutely breathtaking.
Yeah, so, the whole altered universe. You guys are your own crew.
It was. I was literally I sifted through his deck for maybe a minute and a half. Not really. I just not that much time. I just got to check out all the things that he had, but each one just imprinted in my mind. It felt like I was in the Tate. It was awesome.
Yeah,
it was really cool.
Cool. Well, real quick, while I have everyone's attention, I wanted to ask everybody to comment below if you think that an episode like this is something you want to see more of, where Phil and I go over our tournament experience. And even though, we didn't top 8 or whatnot, but we're kind of giving you the play-by-play. If that's something you want to see more of, if it's not, it's totally okay. I just want to find out if this is something you guys are into. And comment, how did you go to SCG Baltimore? How did you do?
Also, for contextual reference, the Tate is a museum, is an art museum in London.
Yes.
Yes. For people who don't know, where
for you classless heathens out there.
Yeah. If you want to go see a Rothko, go to the Tate.
So my round 6. Now I am 3 and 2 as well. So we're both. You're what, 4 and 2 now?
That made me 4 and 2 after
4 and 2. So I will be 4 and 2 at the end of this round. I played against Andy, and it was the mirror 8 cast on 8 cast. Just this is the exact matchup that I love to play, because it's not my best matchup in the format, but I love the 8 cast on 8 cast matchup because you really get to see how your opponent feels about the matchup. Right? Is everything's just sitting out there, and there's so many decisions to make. And you get to see where your opponent prioritizes their plays. So for me, game 1 was a stock who gets and prioritizes Urza Saga. It was me. And Andy went from 20 to 12 to 0, and I was at 34 life at the end of the game. So I just 2 constructs, got him in, and did the stuff. Construct Mania, just it's just constructs. Just do it, But
you got to try the saga. You got to play that, test out that saga.
Yeah.
What is it? Scroll of Isildur.
Scroll of Isildur. And that could have changed the whole game for him. Scroll of Isildur. Well, we have that. We have that video as well. Yeah.
That construct.
Yeah. So in game 2, Emery was the feature of the match. Andy used her with Haywire Might to just completely ruin me. Devastating. Got my saga, brought it back, got a bunch of other stuff. I think got a Retrofitter Foundry too. and I didn't stand a chance in that game. It was just devastating. It just complete sweeps. Like I think, let's see. Yeah, I don't even know. Wherever the cheat is, it doesn't even matter. It was a sweep in that game. Game 3 is where we both started making really interesting choices. Game 1 and 2, either pilot would have played those relatively the same. I think like I was prioritizing my sagas in the beginning, but like any adult would have done that in a scenario where you have them, right? But game 3 was really interesting because Andy had a couple of choices to make, and I had a couple of choices to make. I went all in on sagas, and we already know because I told you I won the match that was ostensibly the right play for me to make. But Andy went on the path of Emery to the exclusion of using his sagas, and I only had like 2 4/4s. Like I had like saga, and the sphere. So I had a 4/4 and a 3/2 with the spear on one of them. So the first hit was only for 4 damage, but I quickly started like making them bigger. And I think he decided in one turn that he was going to go on a different path and play other cards and not activate his construct or his saga for a construct. And because he decided that he was going to cast spells and I had a Forcible in my hand, I just forced that play, keeping the tempo on my end going, time walking him. And by the next turn, he went from we both had been using tombs, so he was at 16, went to 11, and I untapped and just killed him. Like I just had enough on the board to win.
Zach, it sounds like you effectively controlled the narrative.
I did control the narrative in that game. Yes, that it turns out that if you're able, especially in the 8cast mirror, I firmly believe, and you're welcome to disagree with me. I firmly believe that you should not be casting spells if you don't have to cast spells. Using all of your resources that are non-spell based in that matchup, even if you think your opponent has sideboarded out their Force of Wills, just knowing that I set out my chalices. I just don't I don't even play that like weird, like I'm gonna put chalice on 0 game. It always punishes me. So I keep my Force of Wills in and I wait for them to cast a spell that means something. And I just try my all-time hardest to be like, I did something for free. You paid mana to do nothing. And I'm still getting in with my constructs, which is exactly what happened. And at the end, the only issue I had with that match was that at the end of the round, there were 12 minutes left. And we were on the other side of the convention center, and Jimmy John's was all the way on the other end, and I just didn't have enough. I was starving, and I didn't have enough time to get food. So I popped over to the like convention sidebar thing. I grabbed a roast beef sandwich and ate that. No, I don't have a tournament interview with Andy. Andy did not want to do a interview, which is totally fine. No one. I'm not forcing anyone to do interviews with me. But I wanted to go back to round 4 and show you this interview we got with Bosch and Roll, Brian Koval. We also have the full interview post tournament right up here. But this interview right here is of Bosch and Roll when he is 4-0 in the tournament. So this is 2 rounds back for us.
All right, we are live here at SCGCON Baltimore with Brian Koval, aka Bosch and Roll. Brian, how are you doing right now in the tournament?
I am successful. I've defeated all of my opponents.
Oh wow, 4-0 right now because we're in round 4.
Yep.
See anything new? Anything new from the Lord of the Rings set?
I played against Orcish Bowmasters last round out of Rakdos Painter.
Rakdos Painter.
Yeah.
That deck's starting to gain a little bit of popularity. I saw the results yesterday for the trials where that was one of the bigger decks.
Yeah, that's one of these Magic Online squeezes where Rakdos Painter is the stock build in paper because of Chaos Defiler, but we still are just dredging around with mono red on Moto.
Yeah.
So like when I saw the Bowmaster, I was like, that's weird, and then it's not that weird.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Pretty good.
My opponent unfortunately used Lotus Petal to cast the Bowmaster, and then when they died 2 turns later, they showed me a hand of 5 black cards, including the Bowmaster, which I bounced with the Fairy at some point. So just 5 black cards in hand, 4 red sources in play. Not a way to play Magic.
I'm on Painter, and I've been thinking about just throwing it into my deck. I've got 8 sources to cast it with.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. We'll find out how the rest of the tournament goes, though. This is what, round 5 is coming up?
It is, yeah.
And you're doing great. So
it's a long day. 9 rounds is long. We're not celebrating anything yet. But,
of course.
You know, the morning work is done.
Right on. Well, I'll catch up with you as the day continues.
All right, yeah.
Have a good one.
So my round 7 was against Death and Taxes, and there again, I was playing a list of miracles that was on Cemetery Illuminator and Triumph of St. Catherine in the main. I was not on any Terminus. For this event, I positioned myself thinking that Triumph was going to do enough work for me that I wouldn't need the Terminus, and that might have been the wrong call. It was obviously like there were a lot of matchups where Triumph is excellent. I was very happy to see given how much Delver I saw in the room, I was happy that I had Triumph of St. Catherine in my list. However, I did not run against Delver at all in the 9 rounds of the 10K. I ran into it in the 7K, or the 7K, the 5K on the following day, but I did not run into Delver at all, despite I see sitting around it a lot. Like
I keep saying that Delver's popularity is waning, man.
Yeah, like I saw Delver a lot. Like it was at the tables where I was. Like it was around me all day. Like I saw a lot of Delver. There was a lot of Bowmasters to be had, a lot of Grixis Delver around me, but I never actually ran into it. And my pairings ended up making Triumph of St. Catherine look not as strong in that, like against 4-color where they're on, Minsk Uro and Swords to Plowshares,
and they have swords.
Triumph is a little anemic against ALUREN, where they have a bunch of X1 1/1 Death Touchers. Triumph is a bit anemic against D&T, where they're on Yorion, Solitude, Swords to Plowshares, like a lot of white removal. Again, a 5/5 Tarmogoyf from the ground is not really going to get through in those matchups. So usually I'm very happy when I'm playing Miracles to sit across from Deaths and Taxes. In this case, I felt like I was a bit underprepared. And what ultimately ended up happening was they had enough removal for my threats that I wasn't able to get a Cemetery Illuminator engine going. I wasn't able to like protect it long enough to coup enough advantage. And Triumph just did not pose all that difficult of a threat for them between all of the white removal that they had. And it really just came down to we traded. The companion mechanic is really good. He put an additional threat in his hand, so he just naturally was up cards. And then that sort of snowballed the game as he had a Crocus to then eventually grind it out. So both games came down to that. I boarded in my entreats that I had in the board for the grindy matchups where I knew that Triumph wasn't going to be strong enough, but I never found an entreat in time by the time the game was already lost. So it came down to I was unprepared for the matchup. I had the tools in my arsenal if I wanted to be able to target this matchup, but I was much more situated to go up against Delver in this event than I was against D&T. So that's just on me. I could have prepared better for a matchup that I was unprepared for. All of the tools that I would have needed to have win those games were available to me in my prep had I wanted them. And I just made different choices going into the event. And that's how it goes sometimes. But tight games, good games, but I felt underprepared.
Yeah. My round 7 was against Jordan, who was on Blue Painter. And I had never actually played a match against Blue Painter. And let me tell you, I am in love with this deck. Like I want to play Blue Painter now after playing against this deck because it's 8 cast plus. Like it was just like, oh my God, what 3 banger games too. Like we duked it out. It was like watching like Rocky 4. Like it was just amazing to me. And of course I ended up being Ivan Drago in that situation. Suddenly the entire crowd, all the Russians turn on Ivan.
So I recall when I walked this. So I was walking by this match too. Because we had a very similar record, so we were within range of each other all day.
We were always like 2 tables away from each other. I was sure we were going to play against each other.
And it was relatively easy to find you because you were in your Pac-Man suit.
Yes.
So you weren't difficult to spot from a distance. And I remember as I walked by, there was an Urza, Lord High Artificer, sitting across the table from you, and I was like, I didn't know that he was on Painter when I saw that on the table, but I was thinking to myself, I was like, oh, well, that's a mirror breaker if I've ever seen one.
It was indeed a mirror breaker. So in game 1, I pulled ahead early with Urza Saga and got there just before Urza Lord High Artificer like valued me out of the game. Like I snuck in there. I think I ended the game with a Kappa Cannoneer that I like grew out real fast and swung in for the kill, but like I was had that lasted like another turn, I would have lost the game.
Well, I remember us whenever we talk about the, your 8-cast games, and then you're talking about what it's like in the mirror, and you prioritize Urza Saga. It's like, if prioritizing Urza Saga constructs is actually the way to beat that matchup, then just adding more Urza Saga,
adding more constructs,
more constructs, seems like a really potent tool. So when I saw that, I was like, oh man, like why didn't we think of that?
Yeah, no, that like I need to pick some up. That card was amazing. So in game 2. I was on the same plan. I sided out my chalices. I put in some graveyard hate for the Emery situation with the grindstone painter, and I actually dodged a blind flip Urza painter. Like, he had the grindstone out. He shuffled with Urza, flipped it over. I cut the deck, and boom, painter on top. I counter the painter. And I'm like, oh my god, I'm so dead. Emery's right there. Like, I'm in trouble. Top decked a Soul Guide Lantern, slammed it. Okay, I'm still in this game. And the next thing that happened was Hurkyl's Recall, and I couldn't. There's just nothing for me to do. Like, Hurkyl's Recall, I couldn't come back from that. So I rebuilt, like, hanging on for dear life, but eventually I just got outvalued by the pressure of Jordan's deck, and I think that I lost to his construct, like just one giant construct.
I mean, dude, if he was playing two Urza Lord High Artificer in his 75 as well as a Hurkyl's Recall,
yeah,
he knew he had a plan for the mirror. He knew what he was doing.
No, yeah, for sure. I did too, but like, his plan was much better than mine. And if we go into the next game, an even better plan. So my lack of a good night's rest at this point is definitely taken a toll. My reps against this deck, the fact that I've never had any reps against this deck, definitely got me. And between the pressure on my life total, the Grindstone Painter combo, and not to mention Emery coming back, bringing it back, and Haywire Might. Haywire Might against my deck is so bad because I can't even use my Emery. He killed my Saga with Haywire Might. That game was rough. And then remove my Lantern, remove my Retrofitter Foundry. Like, everything I was doing, Haywire Might was just valuing me out of the game. And so,
yeah, just vindicate you every turn.
Oh, it was so bad. I even got my Retrofitter Foundry to turn one of my servos all the way into a 4/4, right? Because the game ended like this. He swung in with two giant constructs, and I was at an odd life total. And I looked at the board and I was like, you're going to put me to 1. And I've got Morgulblade on board. I think I had at that point dealt with the Haywire Might, or I dealt with the Emery. And I was like, all right, like, this is it. Like, I've got to take this damage. I've got one construct, a construct that's coming out next turn. I'll get the Morgulblade, and I have a 4/4 construct. So I was like, I'm not going to block. I'm going to try and get back in and do this. And I take the damage, I'm like, no blockers. And he goes, I'll make a token. So he made another artifact, pumping his team, and I didn't even see it. And so I lost because I wasn't paying attention, it's a sleep issue. Like, had I been paying a little bit more attention, that is a trick that I do, I would have known to do that. So I think that at that point, it was a long day. I could have rolled out the X2 thing, but as fate would have it, X2 didn't even make the top 8. So that was the end of my day.
Yeah, that is a similar status of what happened after my rounds too. After we hit the last couple of rounds, I noticed that there was also a significant drop off in how serious players started taking the event because they were dead.
Yeah,
right? They were dead for top 8. So the atmosphere was much more. It was like it's not that people were uninterested. It's that the lack of like wanting to play the desire to play extremely tight in order to convert a win was no longer there. It was much more loose and like, if I punt, whatever.
We can say that for our 7 rounds, people were trying hard.
Yes.
After that, it's like kind of what have you.
Yeah, the stakes are gone once you're dead for top 8, right? It's like the money to top to make it in the rest of the event just isn't there. So I mean, I can wrap up both my last 2 rounds. I don't have many notes on them. I don't remember.
Before we go into that last round, I couldn't. So Jordan had to move on, and I couldn't get an interview. But you got an interview with me after my final round, but right before I left the convention center.
Oh wow! Hello, my name is Phil Bleckman, Force of Phil, and host of Eternal Durdles, and with me as always, Zach Clark. Zach.
Also the host of Eternal Durdles. Yeah, so all the Durdle maniacs out there got to know that I tried my all-time very hardest to get there. I was 4-2, and you know what? In the semi-mirror, 8-cast versus Blue Painter, I just couldn't get past Urza.
So Urza Lord Hieroglyphers are out of the board in 8-cast. All you 8-cast players listening out there, did it crush you? Do you feel defeated inside?
I have been crushed under 1,000 force tons of constructs, sir.
So Zach Clark, host of Eternal Durdles, how are you going to recover from the ultimate savage beatdown that you faced at the hands of your opponent last round?
Well, with the love and support of all the Durdle maniacs out there, you know, I'm just gonna go back into the tank, and we're gonna keep testing. And, you know, we're going to get better.
You heard it here first. Zach Clark, host of Eternal Durdles, undefeated in spirit, but unfortunately defeated here at SCG Baltimore. I'm Force of Phil for Eternal Durdles, signing off. So I think I'll wrap up my last 2 rounds pretty quickly because they were not matches for stakes. They were just for reps, but like everybody, you know, it was a long day. It was a 9-round event. People were hungry, people were tired, the capacity to top 8 was gone. So I played in round 8. It says against Azorius Tempo. I honestly don't remember what that means or what that was. But
you played Spirits?
Me yeah, I don't know. It's listed as Azorius Tempo, but I didn't mark it down, and I don't remember. Like on MTGMELEE, it's listed as Azorius Tempo.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly what it was, but they 2-0'd me. And then I played against 8-cast in the last round and got there. And let me tell you, I know that Cemetery Illuminator it won me a couple rounds, but against 8-cast where they can't remove Cemetery Illuminator effectively, it just goes deep, and they can never really get a hold on the games because Cemetery Illuminator just ancestraling every turn while also messing with Emery is just really valuable. So yeah. Cemetery Illuminator did a lot of work for me, and I was very happy to sit across from. Normally, I'm not very happy to sit across from 8-cast because Saga is a beating, but Cemetery Illuminator really changes that matchup in a significant way because it just lets you keep up on resources and then also interact with the graveyard in a meaningful way to stop Emery from being an absolute menace. So.
I have here the Azorius Tempo deck, by the way. This is Invisible Stalker, Esper Sentinel, True Name Nemesis, Staggering Insight, Curious Obsession.
Yes. So okay, so yes, I now I remember this match.
You got this up here. I'll actually add that. I'm gonna add all the links I can for deck lists below, so you'll get to see our like who we fought in the rounds, and you'll see them on our Moxfield.
He was on Blue White Bogles, and it was the games were, and I can't stress enough, the most uninteresting games you'll ever play. It was, I'm going to play a thing, I'm going to suit it up, I'm going to fight over whatever, it doesn't matter. And since we were both dead, there was one game where he had suited up an Esper Sentinel with Curious Obsession and then fought over the first removal spell. And the game, there's still a lot of game to be had. Oh, yeah. Right. But the second he fought over the first removal spell, and I was like, this is going to be the most uninteresting and non-compelling match of the weekend. So I just extended my hand after
you got it.
Well, the thing is, I was like, I'm never going to be thinking about this match ever in my testing. I'm not going to learn anything from this game because
you know the answer to this matchup. It's Terminus.
Exactly. Like I like you've already suited up a thing. There's nothing else to be gained from me playing the rest of this game, and I'm not having fun anymore, and I can't top 8. Yeah. So all of the stars align of I'm just going to
it's time to get lunch.
Yeah, it was just the choice of like I'm going to just like have the experience that I want to have now, which is not playing this matchup. And so I extended my hand. I said great games, and then I packed it up. Yeah. But yes, now that you brought it up, I remember that's why I don't remember it because it was a blink.
You literally blanked it out of your mind.
It was literally a blink of an eye match because I was like, no, I don't want to be here.
I mind wiped myself.
I don't want to be here. Yeah, pretty much.
Yep.
That's funny.
That was the whole tournament for us. I don't know, man. I had a blast. I want to do more of these, and if this video performs well, I think we'll do more matches like this. more podcasts like this where we talk about our experience of the tournament and do a round for round, but not like get too gritty into the details and stuff, which I think we did an okay job of.
Yep. I have one thing that I want to talk about in my 5K performance. I went 5 and 3. I mean 5 and 3. I went 4 and 3 across 7 rounds, and I can give some like just real quick rundowns of like what happened. There was one particular moment across the day that was very much a lesson learned that I think might be valuable to people who are watching. So I'll do the quick rundown. Round 1 against Reanimator. I'm playing a shitload of Flusterstorms, and I get there. Commended on both of us being able to play optimally. But one thing that I learned, heads up to all you combo players out there, in game 1, I didn't know what he was playing. I was keeping in the dark, but it took a long time on a mulligan decision, and that tipped me off that he was on combo.
Yeah.
So when you're thinking about what hands you can keep and what you're looking at, get your reps in to maybe not take so much time if you know that it's not going to be a protected kill or something like that, because it informed me on my mulligan to 6 as to what to put back.
Yeah.
So
yeah, keep those you've got to do those openers. Just do your opening reps constantly and see what different hands are worth keeping and be able to do the math by just looking at like 7 different cards.
Yeah, so I was tipped off that I didn't know what kind of combo. I just knew combo. So I was like, okay, well, I don't want these white cards, right? So, I mean, against Reanimator, sometimes you want Source of Plowshares, but for the most part, you want to keep a fatty from hitting the table. So it informed my mulligan. In game 2, I played against Grixis Delver, the first time that I saw Delver and the only time that I saw Delver across from me on the weekend. But something that I learned, so I had switched up my deck list for the 5K, and one of the cards that I moved more towards like a classic Miracles build with like a bunch of Snapcasters. And against Grixis Delver, I was playing a Savine's Reclamation as a way to pick up or recover from a wasteland, but also to turbocharge me up towards Thicker and Treat the Angels. So I played a 1 of Savine's Recollection as just like a value card, because if you pick up a fetch, it represents a mystical tutor off a Mystic Sanctuary later in the game, so there's some value there.
Yeah.
And it also lets me recur Snapcasters for additional spells or dress downs to play against Urza Saga a little bit better. So against Grixis Delver, we get into a really grindy game 1, and I have a Savine's Reclamation with a Snapcaster and a dress down in my yard to his Dragon Rage Channeler, Murktide, no hand, right? So I have 2 Swords to Plowshares in my yard. And so what I do is I say I'm going to flashback Savine's Reclamation, I'm going to target dress down and Snapcaster, and I was able to use a fetch to Mystic Sanctuary 1 Source of Plowshares to the top of my deck. So I would draw it off the dress down and then Snapcaster the other Source of Plowshares to get rid of both its threats.
Oh,
and
my God.
I'd be sitting there with a Snapcaster and I think a couple of cards, but I don't remember what they were in hand, to his empty, to his just board of lands. Right.
Oh my God.
And so I was like, I'm like,
Brutal.
this is it. Like exactly what Savine's Reclamation is here to do, which is grind. It's going to grind. And so I do the flashback. I do that exact line. And right before like the turn passes over to him, he's like, wait a minute, does the Snapcaster, does the dress down see the Snapcaster? And I was like, oh, well, I think that they come in and I stack them, because I think I can have the Snapcaster enter first and then the dress down afterwards, so that like the sequence will show like that. But like, let's call a judge, because I've never actually flashbacked both of these things off of Savine's Reclamation before. So let's just double check to make sure. So we called the judge, and I'm like, I explained the situation. I'm like, hey, judge, like I flashback Savine's Reclamation for dress down and Snapcaster. And we just want to know, do they enter at the same time? Will the Snapcaster see will the dress down stop the Snapcaster? And without missing a beat, without like no second, like additional thought, the judge is like, yeah. I was like, yeah, like the Snapcaster won't trigger. And he's like, yeah, the Snapcaster won't trigger. No hesitation.
No hesitation.
And I was like,
yeah.
And I was like, oh, well, fuck. Okay. I guess like, if that's the case, like it just seemed like it was the easiest question he had received all day.
Yeah.
And I was like,
was it right?
I was like, okay. So I was like, I scooped it up, because of like, if I made that, I already committed to that play.
Of course,
if it doesn't work, then I'm staring down lethal on the table. So we just scooped it up and went to the next game. I learned later on in the day when I was explaining that to the guys in my car, because the guy that I played against, his name was is Anthony Laverde, known for, he was playing Delver, but he's one of the guys that like helped build the breakfast deck that Bosch ended up winning the whole thing with. So we were talking, and Anthony was in my car. So we were talking about it on the way home, and then the rest of the guys in the car were like, that's not how that works. And we were like, what are you talking about? So when you flash back Savine's Reclamation, you target something, and then if you cast it from the graveyard, you copy it. So something else will target. So they stack. So the copy comes off first, putting something into play, that will trigger, and then the next thing will come into play, and that will trigger. So
that's what I thought, yeah.
So it worked the way I thought, which is
that's a bummer that the judge didn't know.
So I flash it back, target the dress down. The copy goes on the stack. I target the Snapcaster. Snapcaster comes in. Trigger goes on the stack. Dress down comes in. Trigger goes on the stack. So it actually does work exactly the way that I thought it would. And I would have that I likely end up winning that game had that been correct. The thing is, the lesson learned from that is it's okay. Like I have no hard feelings on like whatever we call the judge. The judge got it wrong. The judge got it wrong, but whatever. Anthony ended up top 8ing that event, so like it wasn't for naught, right?
Yeah.
So which is great. Anthony had done a lot of work, and I'm very happy that he had success in across one of the tournaments that we played. But the lesson to take away is know how your cards work. I was under the impression that the way that I played the Savine's Reclamation worked the way that I thought it did. But I didn't specifically. I wasn't able to specifically. I wasn't able to specifically articulate in the moment like why I thought it worked that way, because I didn't think to explain how it's like, the copy goes and falls off the stack, and then the other card goes off the stack. And so, even though the judge got it wrong, it's still my responsibility to know how my cards work.
Yeah. On top of that, you could have appealed.
Right. But but that's the thing. I didn't even think. I just interpreted the judge snapping off the answer as like, of course, obviously, if the judge took no time to think about that and just knew the answer immediately, then why I'm not going to question that. But I also didn't know the interaction well enough to be like, Judge, I'd like to appeal because I think that's incorrect, right? Yeah. So ultimately, it's on me to know how my cards work, and so that's like a very valuable lesson learned, right? And now I will never make that mistake again. So that was the big takeaway from the 5K, that the rest of the matches, like some amount of it was interesting, but like not necessarily like any major lessons learned beyond that. I was still soft to Planeswalkers, but that one thing, like, know how your cards work, in tight situations, like even if a judge seems confident and you're not totally sure, ask the judge to please explain to you why the ruling is that way. Even if you think that they're right, it's okay to take an additional minute, because if I just said, Judge, I understand, can you just explain to me why it works that way, right? Like, use it as a learning experience. Yep. Because if I had just taken that one extra beat for the judge to explain what was going on, maybe he misinterpreted.
Yeah, you would have seen the whole,
Maybe he thought the dress down was already on the table when I was flashing back the Snapcaster, and so and so he was answering a question that I didn't ask, right? Like, there's maybe a miscommunication. So had I just taken it 1 second longer to ask the judge, please explain to me why it works this way,
we would be celebrating your top 8 right now.
The outcome might be different. So big lesson learned. Know what your cards do. And if you're not sure why a judge is making a ruling on something, even if you think that you understand why, have them actually explain to you why. You can get the time extension, and it's well worth just knowing for the future what's going on. So, but all in all, I had a great weekend playing.
What a great time!
My record at the end of the weekend was 9-6, so I was a bread and butter, but not enough to make any profitable result. But still had a great time. Would run it back. Can't wait for the next one.
Yeah, and I think that does it for us. Have a good one, everybody.
Come on,